Force be with you. Y'all, it's good to see you, even though I'm looking at very few of you. There's more on the Zoom. Good to see everyone. Hey, you guys on the Zoom, can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, sir.
I forgot how to find chat. Oh, thanks. All right, good to see everyone. Y'all, sorry? One more time. Oh, the quiz. I forgot about the quiz. Yes. No wonder people aren't here. They're taking the quiz on Zoom or on Canvas. I forgot about the quiz. Yes. The quiz is live on Canvas right now. I totally forgot about it. Thank you for the reminder. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone in the room or anyone on the chat have questions? If not, then go ahead and take the quiz. And I'm going to give you at least 15 minutes to do it. And then we will get started with the class. Sorry, I forgot about that, but yes. If there's any question, any problems with the quiz, please let me know either on the chat or here in person, okay? Huh? Good, good, man. Good. Michael, that makes me happy to hear you say that. Good. I'm still going to give you 15 minutes. Nietzsche. Some people say Nietzsche, whatever, it doesn't matter. Oh man, what's up with that? Is it always like that? Seriously? Yes, I do. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Okay, I want to ask the people on chat. If you guys on chat, let me know if you're done with the quiz. Is anyone not done with the quiz? I've got 7 minutes after. Is anyone not done with the quiz? All right, y'all, we're gonna get started. We're gonna get started. If you need to keep working on the quiz, go ahead. I'm gonna ask Michael and Daniel to not talk about other classes in here. We're gonna go ahead and get started with this class if that works for you. And I wanted to start out with this little chart up here. The way I opened up the last class that we had together by talking about Descartes, I sort of said that we've got two more thinkers that we're going to look at, Descartes and Nietzsche. And for each of those two thinkers, I want you to be thinking about, is the thinker in question, Descartes or Nietzsche, are they more like Heraclitus or more like Parmenides, right? Now, so I want to open up with this little exercise. Then I'm going to read one more passage from Descartes to sort of drill down and convince you that it is what we're about to say it is. But then I want to start thinking about Nietzsche, okay? But before anything else, let me just ask you to look at this word. What is this word? Matter. And what is this word? Now, who can tell me why I would associate Heraclitus with matter? Can anyone say anything about that? By the way, do you agree with that? Did I correctly put matter here and form here? Who can tell me why I associated matter with Heraclitus? Yes, Sergio. Yes? Matter is supposed to be formless. That's exactly right.
Sir.
I think it should be. I had an orange light. Now I have a green light. Forgive me. Thank you so much. Let's back up a little bit. Yes, Sergio, that's correct. The reason why I would associate matter with Heraclitus is because Heraclitus says that all is flux. And if all is flux, then I can't even, if all is flux, then it means that there's no stable form. In other words, I can't even point to a triangle or a rectangle. Do you see how this is a rectangle? Or the marker board itself is a rectangle? You can't even point to a rectangle if all is flux, because the moment I point to it, it's already morphed into something else, kind of like Benton, who is constantly shifting shapes and figures, right? And so you can see that if all is flux, there might be matter, and I would argue that there is, but what is there not? Form. That's exactly right. So that's why I put form in association with Heraclitus. Now, can someone tell me why I would put, sorry, did I say form? I meant matter. I'm so sorry, I'm so dumb. That's why I put matter in association with Heraclitus, yeah? Now, can someone tell me why I associated form with Parmenides? Yeah. Yeah, and I'm gonna repeat what you say just for the folks online. Good. Good. Good, good. So I think that I like all that. I think you might be jumping ahead quite a bit though, Jagger, which is fine. Who can raise your hand and tell me exactly the thing that Parmenides states? Heraclitus says all is flux. What does Parmenides say? Someone raise your hand. Yes. Good. Listen, even before he says that, he says that all is right, good. Then in the next move, he says being is not this, this, this. That's exactly right. But when Parmenides says that all is being, and like Daniel correctly said, Daniel, right? Being is not spatially extended, consisting of parts and wholes, change or multiplicity / diversity. I think here's one way to put it. All of that is mental concepts, mental constructs. All of it is mental. In other words, he's not. You can believe what Parmenides says without ever thinking about matter or an object, right? In fact, if you have an object, that might be bad, because that might immediately imply non-being, whack a non-being, because the object might have parts and wholes. That's bad, right? So you see, Parmenides is not talking about stuff or things. He's really talking about something that's mental or intellectual. And I hope that you can see how that goes along with form. Forms are abstract entities. They're not objects in the world that you can touch or point to. They're in the mind. Does that make sense? So that is why I think that you could associate matter with Heraclitus and form with Parmenides. By the way, if you were taking some sort of an exam, by the way, let me pause real quick. Would you agree with me that it's easier to understand the Heraclitus / matter point than it is the Parmenides / form point? Would you agree with me on that? I mean, even just now, I was struggling a little bit to articulate why I associated a form with Parmenides, right? So let's say you were taking a test and you were able to see how matter goes with Parmenides. You could use process of elimination and associate form with Parmenides, right? Am I making sense? Cool. Okay. So what I want to do, and this is what I talked about at the beginning of last class, is I want to take our remaining two thinkers, Descartes and Nietzsche, and associate them with either Heraclitus or Parmenides. Now, would anyone like to say anything about that? Yes, Daniel? Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Descartes has this, Descartes is a reductivist. He tends to reduce the human being, the human person, down to mind, saying that your body doesn't matter. That's a strong indication that we should put an X here. Do you agree? Yes. Good. Now, by the way, in a minute, I'm going to talk to you about why we should put an X for Nietzsche here under Heraclitus, who says that you can't step in the same river twice, but then Cratylus one-ups him and says, you can't even step in the same river once. Why? Because there is no river. Why is there no river? Because everything's constantly shifting and fluxing and moving like Benton. So you think you see a river, but actually, will that river be there in a million years? No. So maybe there is no such thing as a stable river or a stable chair. Yes, Sergio. Good. Why are you asking why I even use the label Heraclitus as opposed to Cratylus? Is that what you're asking? Yeah. Yeah, and I do try to get that idea in there, the more extreme idea in there. Why do I present it primarily in terms of Heraclitus? I'll tell you why. It's because Cratylus was not a pre-Socratic thinker. And Heraclitus and Parmenides, I don't know if they actually lived at the same time, and I'm certainly not trying to say that they knew each other, but they're in the same general milieu historically. Does that make sense? Yes, they began the whole thing. That's exactly right. Okay, now, y'all, before we put an X by Nietzsche and I try to convince you that he goes along with Heraclitus, all is flux, before we do that, I wanted to read a quick passage just as an example. This is from Meditation 2. And let me just say that we're going to move to Nietzsche today. We're going to move to Nietzsche today. I'm going to try to say a few things about Nietzsche, and then we're going to begin to watch a documentary, okay? But before we do that, before we completely say goodbye to Descartes, I want to look at a passage from the Meditations. And this is the second meditation, Meditation 2. It's my page 67. My page 67, marginal number 30-ish. Can y'all see that? And he's talking about wax. Okay, now I'm going to read this. Let us consider those things which are commonly believed to be the most distinctly grasped of all. One of the things that I probably mentioned about Descartes, maybe Descartes believes in what he calls clear and distinct ideas. Clear and distinct ideas, I'm not going to talk about it. It's just related to his demand for certainty. He says that if you can't be certain of something, then you can't know anything at all. And if you think science is real, whatever, that's you're being deceived. That's BS. If you can't find something that is certain, okay? Clear and distinct ideas is related to that, but I'm just going to read. Let us consider those things which are commonly believed to be the most distinctly grasped of all, namely the bodies we touch and see. So he's talking about bodies. Immediately, Parmenides would object and say non-being, whack a non-being, because A, there's more than one body, which means that there's body A and B, body A, body B, and body A is not body B. Did you hear that? Not, whack a non-being. Immediately, Parmenides would object, but Descartes is just doing a thought experiment here, okay? And by the way, remember his journey of doubt. Remember his journey of doubt? So he starts on the outside and doubts birds and oak trees, and then he moves in and begins to doubt his fingers, his toes, his kneecaps, and then he moves even closer inward and begins to doubt what? Things like stomach rumblings, things like emotions like anxiety and depression, which are bodily phenomena. And then he keeps doubting. He doubts his memories, his imaginations, and finally he goes inward, 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 and he gets to something that he says, aha, I've landed on something that I cannot doubt. But here's the point. What was on this outer circle? Body parts is one level in. What's on the very, very outside? Objects. That's what he's talking about right here, right? That's what he's talking about right here. Let us consider those things which are commonly believed to be the most distinctly grasped at all, namely the bodies we see and hear and touch and see. He's already doubted that. He's already said, I can't be sure that bodies exist. So you already know that he's not going to argue that these bodies are real. Are you with me? Okay, but let's keep reading. Not bodies in general, mind you, for these general perceptions are apt to be somewhat more confused, but one body in particular. Let us take, for instance, this piece of wax. Imagine that he's sitting in his living room and there's a fire roaring in the fireplace, okay? Let's take this piece of wax, he says. It has been taken quite recently from the honeycomb. Can you all see that? It has been taken quite recently from the honeycomb. It has not yet lost all the honey flavor. He can still smell like the honey and maybe even the flowers. It retains some of the scent of flowers from which it was collected. Its color, shape, and size are manifest. It's hard and cold. It is easy to touch. It's not like a cloud or a puff of someone's breath. Like it's a real thing. You can touch it. It's easy to see, right? If you rap on it with your knuckle, it will emit a sound. In short, everything is present in it that appears needed to enable a body to be known as distinctly as possible. If anything can possibly be known distinctly with the senses, it's this piece of wax, Descartes says. But notice that as I'm speaking, I'm bringing it close to the fire. What happens when wax gets closer to fire? It begins to melt. The remaining traces of the honey flavor are disappearing. The scent is vanishing. The color is changing. The original shape is disappearing. Its size is increasing. It is becoming liquid and hot. You can hardly touch it. And now when you rap on it, it no longer emits any sound. As it begins to melt, it's getting less clear and less distinct, isn't it? It seems like it's becoming kind of a big mess. It seems like it's becoming a blooming, buzzing confusion. I'm starting to think that Heraclitus might be right. If everything is like this wax, then nothing is real, nothing is stable. Are you with me? The wax is like those sandcastles in the time-lapse video that we talked about. It used to be there, but now it's just sort of becoming a blob. Does the same wax still remain? I must confess that it does. No one denies that it does. No one thinks otherwise. I'm going to pause right here. Remember Aristotle's metaphysical spectrum, right? Remember Aristotle's metaphysical spectrum? And over here you have pure form. Oops. Yeah. Over here you have pure form. Over here you have what? Prime matter. Do you remember what the only thing that Aristotle says about prime matter is? It has spatial extension. Does the wax have spatial extension even when it's becoming a blob? Yes or no? Yes. You can still measure it. You remember that numbers were over here? There was something special about triangles and shapes that made them really similar to pure form. Remember that? But do you remember the analogous thing, the opposite thing that was sort of over here, almost to the extreme of prime matter? You remember what was right here? Yes, ma'am? The four elements: earth, wind, fire, water. Earth, like a dirt clod, or just like a blob of mud. I even drew like a shit emoji. Remember that? That's like the wax. The wax is almost like these four elements. It's losing its form. It's almost like as it melts, like maybe before it melted, it was a candle, or I don't know, a wax, like a cross, I don't know, or maybe a fish or a bird. But as it gets closer to the fire, it's losing its birdness. It's becoming just a blob. It's becoming almost prime matter. It's kind of like the shit emoji or the dirt, right? That's what's going on in this thought experiment that Descartes is doing. And now, does the same wax remain? Oops, you guys gotta keep me on my toes. Does the same wax remain? I must confess that it does. No one denies it. No one thinks otherwise. So what was there in the wax that was so distinctly grasped? Certainly none of the aspects that I reached by means of the senses. Y'all remember how earlier in the semester I told you that for Aristotle, everything that we know by the senses. You do not know anything that you haven't seen or heard or tasted or touched or smelled. 100% of what you know by the senses. when I walk into my daughter's room. You know, when you're a parent these days, and probably when you're a roommate, yeah, like you walk in on someone's bedroom, there's like a 50% chance that you're about to be recorded and put on social media. So I've developed this signal with my daughters. I go like I walk in the room and I go like this. And if they go like this back, it means that I better be careful because I'm being recorded. Why was I talking about that? I don't remember. Oh yeah, I better be careful. Wait, why was I talking about that? I don't remember. The senses, though. Aristotle says that 100% of what you know by the senses. But for Plato, is that true? No. For Plato, it's all about what? Who can remind me? It's all about memory. Memory. Plato thinks that there's things that we have deep down inside of us. It's kind of like Freud's subconscious that we picked up from past lives. Because remember, Plato believes in reincarnation, aka transmigration of the soul. So Descartes is talking about the senses. Certainly none of the aspects that I reached by means of the senses. See, he's beginning to undermine the dependability of what he sees. He's beginning to call into question sense perception as a means of knowledge. Let me read these sentences again. Does the same wax still remain? I must confess that it does. No one denies it. No one thinks otherwise. So what was there in the wax that was so distinctly grasped? Certainly none of the aspects that I reached by means of the senses. He's saying, I didn't know what the wax is by looking at it. That's kind of crazy, but that's what he's saying. For whatever came under the senses of taste, smell, sight, touch, or hearing has now changed, and yet the wax remains. Say it again, Sergio.
I don't understand why. Does he mean that he can't trust the senses, or that he can't trust what he can measure? Because it's like
he doesn't say anything about measuring.
he said that.
He's saying that you can't trust the senses.
But he said he can trust his body, so you can measure his body.
Well, I don't think he says that he can trust a body. He might say that that people assume that you can. We don't really have time to read it over. Let me tell you what's kind of weird. Yes, ma'am, Sarah. He is saying something like that. Well, wait, can you repeat your question? Okay, wait, I'm going to repeat your question. Is he saying that through the senses, the physical wax doesn't change? Let me say yes and no. I think let me tell you how you're being a genius with your question. You are correct to point out that on his view, something is not changing. Something is remaining constant. However, his access to that thing that's remaining constant is not coming through the senses. That's his point. I'm going to keep reading. By the way, just quick side note. Philosophy is hard, y'all. It really is hard. Notice he's talking about change. It kind of sounds like he might be channeling the spirit of Heraclitus. Doesn't it? Heraclitus is the one that says that all is flux. However, would Parmenides deny that stuff appears to change? No. Parmenides would not deny that stuff appears to change. He would just say that stuff that appears to change isn't real. It's not being. It's an illusion. It's a deception. Parmenides wouldn't say that it doesn't seem like my pen just fell. Parmenides wouldn't deny that I seem to have just witnessed my pen falling. He wouldn't deny that. He would just say that that's not real. A Buddhist wouldn't deny that things in the world seem to change. They just deny that that's what's real. Are you with me? So you see, actually, Descartes is channeling not the spirit of Heraclitus, but the spirit of Parmenides. He's saying that it seems like the wax is changing, but if that's true, then I can't know what the wax is. There has to be something that's remaining constant, as Sarah implied, and it can't be what I see. That's what he's saying. I'm going to keep reading. Perhaps the wax was what I now think it is, namely that the wax itself never really was the sweetness of the honey. Notice this is taste, nor the fragrance, that's smell, nor the whiteness, that's sight, shape, sight, sound, hearing. He's talking about the senses. He's saying maybe the wax itself never really was those things. What I hear, what I see, what I taste, what I touch, what I smell. But instead was a body that a short time ago manifested itself to me in these ways and now does so in other ways. But just what precisely is the thing that I thus imagine? Let us focus our attention on this and see what remains after we have removed everything that does not belong to the wax, only that which is something extended, flexible, and mutable. That sounds a lot like how Aristotle describes prime matter. But what is it to be flexible and mutable? Is it what my imagination shows it to be, namely that this piece of wax can change from a round to a square shape or from the latter to a triangular shape? Not at all, for I grasp that the wax is capable of innumerable changes of this sort, even though I am incapable of running through these innumerable changes by using my imagination. Therefore, this insight is not achieved by the faculty of imagination. What is it to be extended? Is this thing's extension also unknown? For it becomes greater in wax that is beginning to melt, greater in boiling wax, and greater still as the heat is increased. And I would not judge correctly what the wax is if I did not believe that it takes on an even greater variety of dimensions than I could ever grasp with the imagination. See, he's downplaying the imagination. It remains for me to concede that I do not grasp what this wax is through the imagination. Rather, I perceive it through the mind alone. That's the point. I perceive it through the mind alone. Pure form. Did you hear that? Pure form. Y'all, this is what philosophy is really fucking difficult. And most people think boring. There's a few people who are like, oh my God, if I'm going to figure out what I believe and what's real, I got to go through the hard work of reading and understanding this stuff. I'm one of those weirdos. Some of you are, but most of you aren't. That's okay. I still like you. But this is what it's like. It remains for me to concede that I do not grasp what this wax is through the imagination. Rather, I perceive it through the mind alone. That's what I was wanting to read. See, Descartes says we don't actually know things through the senses. He's like Plato. He's not like Aristotle. He says we know things only through the mind. And there's a lot more that we could say about that, but I'm done. I'm done. I hope that I showed you that Descartes, he uses this wax example actually to say I don't know what wax is through the senses. The wax changes, it expands, and therefore, if there is such a thing as wax, I have to know it in the mind alone. And that's why we associate Descartes with form / Parmenides. Okay? Now, y'all, as of right now, I'm done with Descartes. And now we're going to move to Nietzsche. All right? Nietzsche is our final thinker in this class. I I happen to love Nietzsche. I want to say a few things about Nietzsche, and then actually what we're going to do is we're going to watch a documentary. And I was thinking about this before the class. For those of you watching on Zoom, I'm actually going to stop the class recording, and I'm just going to give you the link. And I'm worried that if I put this YouTube video on Zoom, it's going to get flagged for copyright issues, and I won't be able to put it on my YouTube channel. And therefore, I'm not going to show the video through Zoom. Yeah. I think that that's probably the best way for me to proceed. So if you're not in class, we'll try to stay on the same page. Like, for example, maybe today we'll say, we're going to watch the first 20 minutes of the video. We'll do it like that. But I'm worried that if I watch the video through Zoom and then try to put the video on my YouTube channel, it'll get flagged for copyright issues, and I won't be able to put it on my YouTube channel. Therefore, I'm going to pause the Zoom recording, and you folks who are not with us in person, I'm going to tell you how much of the video to watch. Okay? Very complicated. Oh my God. But before I do that, I just want to say a few things about Nietzsche, and we'll see how long I talk. I don't want to talk very long. How about if I try to talk for like 10 minutes and then we watch 15 minutes of the video? Let's shoot for that. I don't have any planned remarks. I don't have a lecture outline or anything like that. I just want to say some things about Nietzsche real quick. First off, Nietzsche is very famous. Nietzsche is Nietzsche is trendy. Even today, Nietzsche is trendy. Descartes is not trendy. Descartes is not trendy. There are really very few like intellectuals in our culture, or even say filmmakers, who buy into Descartes' ideas. Okay, far fewer buy into who did we read before Descartes? Yeah, even fewer buy into Aristotle's ideas. Okay. But people do buy into Nietzsche's ideas. In fact, postmodern theorists, the kind of people who think that gender is a construct and race is a construct, they are drinking from the font of Nietzsche. Now, is that why I like Nietzsche? No, that's not why I like Nietzsche. Let me tell you why I like Nietzsche. First off, I like Nietzsche because he is a wonderful writer. If you read his work, and if you're a reader, if you like to read, in other words, you're capable of reading and you're not just a mindless person who plays video games all day, no offense. But if you, let's say that you like to read, then there's probably certain authors that you like to read and others that you don't. Maybe you really like to read Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, but then there's other authors that you just don't like. Well, Nietzsche is a brilliant, pleasurable writer, at least in my opinion. And that's relatively rare for philosophers. I mean, it's difficult to imagine someone reading Descartes for pleasure, right? I mean, we just read that passage and you probably weren't super enthralled. But with Nietzsche, it's different, at least in my opinion. He's a beautiful, wonderful writer. That's one reason I like him. I want to tell you at least one other reason why I like him, and then I want to say a few other things about him. Another reason that I like him is that he does channel the spirit of Heraclitus. And so I guess we could go ahead and put an X right here right now, but I'm going to do it in a minute when I talk about matter. He does channel the spirit of Heraclitus. Now, am I saying that I prefer Heraclitus over Parmenides? No. Am I saying that I prefer Parmenides over Heraclitus? No. First off, I don't really want you to know what I think. I don't care if you know what I think. I want you to know what Aristotle thinks, what Descartes thinks, what Nietzsche thinks. But I will say this, that for certain thinkers, and in particular thinkers that are formative for Christianity, those thinkers, and Aristotle is one of them, are both. And so if you held a gun to my head and said, Father Matt, are you a Parmenides guy or a Heraclitus guy? I would have to say, I'm both. Because thinkers like Aristotle are both, are they not? Does Aristotle not talk about prime matter over here? That's Heraclitus. And pure form over here, that's Parmenides. Aristotle talks about both. He embraces both. Heraclitus only embraces this side, right? Parmenides only embraces this side of the metaphysical spectrum. But Aristotle embraces both. So if you held a gun to my head, I would probably admit I'm both. Aristotle's both. Augustine, Aquinas, and C.S. Lewis, my 3 stock examples of Orthodox Christianity, are both. But because I believe in both, that means that I also believe in Heraclitus, which is kind of crazy, because Heraclitus is what you would have to call a nihilistic thinker. Now, let me write that word on the board. I'm telling you why, the second reason why I like Nietzsche. And I like him because he channels the spirit of nihilism. Now, that might surprise you to hear a priest think that nihilism is cool. But before I talk more about that, do you even know what nihilism is? This word, nihil, in German means nothing. Now, if I were really writing in German, I would have to make that N a capital, because all nouns in German begin with capital letters. Kind of weird. But nihilism is the idea that at the end of the day, nothing is real. I mean, that was like a radically simple way to put it. So if we were to say that no thing is real, you'd have to say that what we mean by thing is things like Aristotle calls composite unities of form and matter, chairs, oak trees, markers. None of those things are real. Okay? Now, can you see that that is what Heraclitus / Cratylus are saying? Right? Cratylus is saying that very thing. There's no such thing as a river because it's always changing. The moment you point to it, it's something else, like Benton. The moment you point to him, he's morphed into something else, like the sandcastles. What I'm trying to say is that Nietzsche channels this worldview, and he channels it in a I don't know, a way that I find intriguing and really interesting. Is it scary? Yeah. Because Nietzsche thinks that there's no such thing as God, that there's no such thing as science, there's no such thing as male and female, there's no such thing, you cannot do scientific research. He thinks that it's all a power play. The whole damn thing is a power play. He thinks that all of knowledge in the West is a power play that is used on the part of the strong to oppress the weak. And he calls that will to power. But in reality, there's no such thing as male and female. There's no such thing as, I don't know, the law of thermodynamics. This is just an invention. It's a cultural construct that people use. You might say that they use them for control. By the way, isn't it intuitively reasonable to think that science is a tool that we use to wield control over the earth, over the world, over nature, over reality? Doesn't that make sense? I mean, now notice when we talked about science earlier in the class, that's not how I presented science. I presented it as knowledge. Remember Daedalus's figurines? And they like Harry Potter, like the chess pieces in the first Harry Potter movie, they just move spontaneous all over the place. And Euthyphro, in the Euthyphro, Socrates says, knowledge is tied down. Remember that? That doesn't sound like a power play, and it doesn't even sound like control. It sounds like a pursuit of truth. Are you with me? But Nietzsche comes along and says, that's bullshit. I mean, you can claim that you're pursuing the truth, but it's really just a power play, according to Nietzsche.
Some people would say it's both, like
Some people might say it's both. But I just want to say, because look, this is a philosophy class, and so, y'all, the reason it's great to be in a philosophy class is because you can hit the pause button and take some deep breaths and say, what do I fucking think is real? Why do I actually get out of bed in the morning? And is that legit? Okay, so it's not like your finance class or your organic chemistry class. And so this is, let me give you an example of why philosophy is cool. We live in a world, so Sergio, yes, maybe science is both of these two things. On the one hand, it's a pursuit of knowledge. On the other hand, it's technology. What is technology? That's control. That's trying to that's going into some African country, mining the minerals so that we can have what? iPhones. That's technology. That's control. Are you with me? So yeah, maybe science, maybe there's space to say that it's both. Maybe like if you were to write a book, what is science? You could argue that it's both. It's both the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. For example, wouldn't it be nice to know how life began or how the universe began? That doesn't seem like technology, right? That's just knowledge for its own sake. Are you with me? Maybe that's a science thing. Okay, but maybe this other thing, technology, is also a science thing. We want to cure cancer. We want to kill the coronavirus. We want to extend the human lifespan to 200 years, which sounds like hell, by the way. Maybe science is both of these things, but here's what I want to say to you right now. Do you realize that you are living in a world? And by the way, I'm 48. God willing, I'll be dead in 5 decades. You won't. My daughters won't, ages 13 and 17. And you guys are living in a world where science has become almost completely technology. Would you agree with that? I mean, look, I'm getting really off track. Who is it that has the power in the physics department of the University of Texas at Austin? It's fucking corporations. What are they motivated by? Profit, money. That's not science for knowledge's sake. Are you with me? So what I'm trying to suggest is that maybe Nietzsche's right. It seems like we're living in a world where science actually is just technology, and it actually is just control, and it actually is just human beings raping the earth, mining the earth for more iPhones. That kind of sounds like the strong eating the weak. Will to power. And if we need to move into Nairobi or name some African city, so be it. Right? We're not going to pay them a living wage. We just want their minerals. That actually does kind of sound like the strong eating the weak. It actually does kind of sound like science is nothing but will to power. Maybe Nietzsche's onto something. Wait, Father Matt, you're a Christian. Yeah, I'm a Christian. I can call a spade, and maybe Nietzsche is accurately diagnosing a feature of our modern Western secular world. But see, these are some of the reasons why I like Nietzsche. Because he's able to sort of wake us up and be like, holy shit, the world seems very nihilistic. And remember how at the beginning of the class, when I was talking about this end of Aristotle's metaphysical spectrum, I was talking about Heraclitus, I kept talking about, you guys remember the phrase blooming, buzzing confusion? That's what Nietzsche thinks. He thinks that that reality is a blooming, buzzing confusion. But do you remember how I kept appealing to Genesis 1:2? And the earth was formless and void. See, even the Bible, I would argue, recognizes that there is truth to nihilism. Now, are you with me so far? Do you understand my point? Like, formless and void, the earth was formless and void. What? God, I thought you made trees and I thought you made man in your own image. No, Genesis 1:2 says that the earth was formless and void. Now, for the Bible and for Christianity, Genesis 1:2 does not have the last word. That's true. It's true that after Genesis 1:2, you have Genesis 1:3 and the rest of Genesis 1, and that in Genesis 1, day 1, God makes light. And he separates light from darkness, and God begins to create form, Parmenides, form and order, not chaos, but order into the world. That's true. But I think I've convinced you, or I think that you ought to recognize that there is a role for chaos in the Bible. And by the way, it's not just Genesis 1 and 2, because later on in the story, something bad happens. The human being sins, we call that the fall, and guess what? Things get more chaotic. Things tend to become formless and void. And so there's nihilism again in the Christian story. So you see, I think that I'm on good footing as a Christian to really, really like Nietzsche. Does it mean that at the end of the day I agree with him? No, it doesn't. But I think that he is a necessary voice and has something super important to teach us. That's what I think, okay? Now, those are some reasons why I like Nietzsche. Now let me just say some of the things that he's famous for, okay? One thing is that he's famous for this statement, and maybe you already know. Let me ask you, what is Nietzsche's most famous statement? Anyone know? So we live in the Bible Belt of East Texas, and there was a movie that came out 3 or 4 years ago called God Is Not Dead. That's a Christian movie, supposedly. I wouldn't watch it for $1 million because I think that movies should be good art, not like some weird fundamentalist thing, but art, beauty. Anyway, the point is, that movie is called God Is Not Dead. What does Nietzsche say? God is dead. That's Nietzsche's probably his most famous statement, which is sort of how the movie gets its title. Nietzsche says God is dead. Now, the movie talks about this a little bit. We're not even going to start the movie today. That's fine. We will start the movie next time. In fact, I might not even Zoom the next class. Why don't we say that if we do nothing else in the next class, we will watch the first, let's say, gosh, what am I going to do? Let's say the first 30 minutes of the documentary. Okay? We'll do that. And so I don't want to cover the territory that the documentary covers, but I do just want to say, like I'm trying to give you some big highlights of Nietzsche, and one of them is this statement, God is dead. And it's not that Nietzsche says it, it's that one of the characters in one of his books says it, and that's an important distinction, okay? But what does it mean? What does it mean to say that God is dead? What does Nietzsche mean by this statement? He doesn't mean that the metaphysical being called God, sort of like the thing Aristotle believes in, the unmoved mover, he's not saying that that thing used to be alive and now it died. No. What he's saying is that the concept of God has died. The concept of God has died. And by the way, that should sound like one of the big points I make in this semester. I've said over and over again, I don't care if you believe in God at one level. I mean, as a philosophy professor, it's not my job to care if you believe in God. So in that regard, I don't care if you believe in God. But what you must understand is that people have believed in God. And that affects the history of philosophy. And at this point, I typically talk about things like human rights. Most of you in this room believe in human rights. In fact, probably all of you do. I hope all of you do. But you wouldn't believe in that if it weren't for Christianity, if it weren't for God, if it weren't for Judaism. Because in order to really have a view of human rights, well, I'm not even going to say that. I'm going to say that historically the idea of human rights is dependent on the idea of God. That's true. So you see, it's not that I want you to believe. I insist that you appreciate the importance of the belief in God for the history of thought. In other words, I'm not actually talking about God, I'm talking about the concept of God. Okay? That's the same with Nietzsche. He doesn't mean that God as a metaphysical being died. That God used to be alive and then 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, he died. No, no, no. He means that the concept has died. Put it another way, he means that no one believes in God anymore. That's what he means. He means that in the West, in Western civilization, people used to believe in God in Thomas Aquinas' day, in Augustine's day. But now, toward the end of the 19th century, AKA the 1800s, according to Nietzsche, we're moving into a phase where actually no one really believes in God anymore. That's what he's saying. That's what he means by the statement, God is dead. Okay? Now, does Nietzsche think that this is a good thing or a bad thing? He thinks it's a good thing. He thinks it's a good thing. Why? Well, we don't really have time to talk about it. It's because he hates Christianity. That's why. It's because he hates Christianity and Judaism. Now, why does he hate Christianity and Judaism? It's not because he thinks that it's false or something. He thinks that it's weak. He looks at Jesus and he says, Jesus is a fucking loser. That, by the way, that sounds kind of like Donald Trump, doesn't it? I mean, Nietzsche says that Jesus is weak, and he hates that. By the way, is he right? Is Jesus weak? Yes. St. Paul says things like, my power is made perfect in weakness. I think that Nietzsche does correctly understand Christianity. He just rejects it and hates it. Because Nietzsche's all about power. So he hates Christianity, and therefore he hates Judaism. I hope that you realize that Christianity and Judaism are the same. It's as if Judaism is the trunk and Christianity is the branches. They're the same. And Nietzsche hates it because he hates weakness. What does he celebrate? He celebrates the will to power, right? That's what he says about science. Science isn't about knowledge. Science is about manipulation, manipulating the earth, getting minerals out of the earth for iPhones. And if poor people in Africa get in our way, we'll just mow them down. I mean, he doesn't really say that because that's too like embarrassing, but that's what he means. Do I think that Nietzsche has sort of a brutal personality? You know, good question. I actually don't. So one of the things that you, like, let's say that you were to become a philosophy major. Oh, darn, it's not possible at UT Tyler. But let's say that it were. And let's say you were to become a philosophy major and start really loving philosophy and working hard at it. One of the things that you would quickly realize is that there's always an issue of interpretation. Like, there is Nietzsche's texts, you know, pretend like this is a text of Nietzsche. There is the text, but then there's also what the hell does it mean and how do we understand it? There's text and interpretation, and different people have interpreted Nietzsche in different ways. And I guess what I'm trying to say to you, Sergio, I'm wanting to say two things. Number one, the way that he's been dominantly interpreted is brutal. As we'll see in the documentary, even the Nazis co-opted him. His older sister, her name was Elizabeth, basically made it seem like he was a Nazi, and she made a lot of money off doing that. Now, was Nietzsche really a Nazi? Would he really have bought into Hitler's final solution in exterminating the Jews? I don't know. I will say this, that when you look at the documentary, you'll see that I think that he was actually kind of a gentle person, and weirdly, he was weak. That's crazy, isn't it? Isn't it crazy that a weakling is the one who says, just mow them over? I'm not going to say anything about Donald Trump right now. But yes, that's right. I think that's right. So I hope that that answers your question a little bit. I wanted to say like one or two other things about Nietzsche, but I'm almost out of time. In fact, I am out of time. What else do I want to say about Nietzsche? Yeah, I think that's it. We will watch the documentary next time. I hope that you'll come to class. I need to say one more thing. So the reason why I watched this documentary in class is because I hit the pause button and talk. It's helpful. I can do that. I can hit the pause button and I can be like, did you hear this word? Let me tell you what they mean by that. So what does that mean for Zoom? I'm not sure. Well, first off, I would say, come to class. Please come to class. Please come to class. If you can't come to class, I'm not sure what I'll do. Because again, I'm afraid that if I put the YouTube video on my YouTube channel, it'll get flagged for copyright issues. I mean, I could record a second lecture, but I don't have time for that. So I don't know what I'll do. Maybe I'll. Ooh, that's a good idea. I'll think about that. Will you help me sort of remember that? Anyway, what I really want to say is come to class. Okay, so I hope to see you on Monday. We're going to watch the Nietzsche video. Let me say this. It'll probably take us like 2 or 3 classes to get through the Nietzsche video. I don't know if you've noticed, but the end of the semester is right around the corner. After we get through the Nietzsche documentary, we will read and discuss the Apollonian world, the Dionysiac worldview. And that'll be the last thing we do for the class. So we're ending on a Heraclitan note because yes, Nietzsche belongs to the Heraclitan tradition. He thinks that there's no such thing as form. The only thing that exists is flux and a blooming, buzzing confusion. All right? May the force be with you. If you're Jewish, happy Passover. If you're Christian, happy Easter. If you're an atheist, I still love you. Peace.